The room is quiet, the kind of quiet that carries history in its breath. A single coin rests in the palm of a hand, its silver-gray surface catching light that hasn't changed in decades. At first glance, it looks ordinary, safe, familiar. But that's exactly how the most dangerous mysteries begin, because somewhere inside this 1968 Washington quarter, something is missing: a broken bar, and what's missing may be the very reason it matters. Don't look away. A broken bar. This part changes everything. In 1968, America was holding its breath. The nation was fractured, restless, uncertain about tomorrow. The Vietnam War dominated nightly news. Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated. Robert Kennedy would follow. Trust in institutions was eroding, and even the smallest symbols of stability and money itself were quietly changing. Coins were no longer just coins. They were messages, decisions, compromises struck behind closed doors. And in that year, as the U.S. Mint rushed to modernize, streamline, and regain control, one small detail vanished from millions of quarters. Or at least, that's what they told the public. The Washington quarter had already lived many lives by 1968. Introduced in 1932 during the Great Depression, it had evolved from silver to clad, from craftsmanship to efficiency. By the late 1960s, silver was gone from circulating quarters, replaced by copper-nickel layers designed to save costs and discourage hoarding. Americans were already suspicious. Older citizens remembered the weight of real silver in their pockets. They could feel the difference, and that feeling mattered. But something wasn't right. A broken bar. For the first time in modern U.S. coinage, mint marks were intentionally removed from circulating coins. No D for Denver, no S for San Francisco, no way to tell where a coin was made. The official explanation was simple: reduce coin collecting speculation, stop hoarding, keep money flowing. But collectors still argue about this detail, because removing identity from money is never just administrative, it's philosophical. It raises questions, and the 1968 Washington quarter without a mint mark became the perfect symbol of that quiet decision. Most people never noticed. They spent them at gas stations, grocery stores, toll booths. They disappeared into couch cushions and parking meters. But a small group of Americans, older collectors, the careful observers, felt unease. Coins had always told stories, dates, designs, mint marks. And now, one of those voices had gone silent. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because while all 1968 quarters appear to have no mint mark, not all of them are the same. The absence itself became the beginning of a hunt for anomalies, mistakes, subtle differences that only reveal themselves under magnification and patience. The kind of patience learned over decades. At the Philadelphia Mint, massive presses ran day and night. New clad plan case fed into machines designed for speed, not artistry. Dies were changed quickly. Quality control struggled to keep pace. And in that chaos, tiny irregularities slipped through. Die cracks forming along Washington's profile, slight doubling in the lettering of Liberty, off-center strikes that were dismissed as negligible, but to a trained eye, they were signatures. But something wasn't right. A broken bar, because some 1968 quarters struck without mint marks displayed characteristics that shouldn't have survived circulation: sharp strikes, unusual luster, proof-like surfaces where none were supposed to exist, and even more unsettling, whispers began to circulate of quarters that appeared to be struck on experimental or transitional plancates, metal compositions not officially acknowledged. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar. In 1968, the San Francisco Mint resumed proof coin production, and for the first time, proofs carried the S mint mark. Officially, no proof quarters without mint marks should exist, and yet, A handful of high-grade 1968 quarters surfaced over the years that defied easy classification, too sharp for circulation, too perfect to be accidents, too ordinary looking to attract immediate attention. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn, because the psychology of older collectors is not driven by hype, it's driven by memory, by the sense that something slipped past while the world was distracted. The 1968 no mint mark quarter sits right at that intersection of between silver and clad, between old America and new. It represents a moment when the rules changed quietly, without ceremony. Yet what experts discovered next to broken bar changed everything. Under advanced metallurgical testing decades later, certain 1968 quarters showed inconsistencies in layer bonding and weight tolerance, nothing dramatic enough to alarm the mint at the time, but enough to suggest experimental adjustments in the clad process were happening in real time. Coins struck during those transitions were never meant to be special, they were meant to work, to function, but survival is what creates rarity, not intention. But something wasn't right. A broken bar, because high-grade examples of the 1968 no mint mark quarter are astonishingly scarce, not because they weren't made, but because they weren't saved. No one thought they should be. They were common, invisible, and invisibility is the greatest enemy of preservation. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar. Why do so few exist in pristine condition? Why do population reports show dramatic drop-offs above certain grades? Why do the finest known examples cluster around specific die pairings? These are the kinds of questions that don't get answered quickly. They linger, they pull collectors back year after year, and this is where the story takes an unexpected turn, because when a coin becomes hard to replace, its value begins to change quietly, not explosively, not publicly, slowly, respectfully, auction by auction, estate by estate. Older collectors understand this rhythm. They've seen it before, with coins that once sat ignored in desk drawers, later commanding attention simply because time ran out. Yet what experts discovered next to broken bar changed everything. In recent years, a handful of ultra-high-grade 1968 no mint mark quarters graded at the very top of the scale have surfaced with characteristics so clean, so well struck, that specialists believe they may represent the earliest production runs before dies deteriorated. First strikes, in effect, though never labeled as such, coins that escaped circulation by chance alone. But something wasn't right. A broken bar. Because when these pieces appeared, competition followed, quiet bidding wars, private sales, no headlines, no frenzy, just serious money moving carefully. And with each transaction, the ceiling lifted. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar. Is the true rarity the coin itself, or the condition? Is it the missing mint mark, or the moment it represents? The answer, as always, is both. Coins are time capsules, and the 1968 Washington quarter without a mint mark captures a year when America tried to hide change behind normalcy. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn, because value is not just numeric, it's emotional. For someone who lived through 1968, who remembers the sound of news bulletins and the feel of coins that no longer rang silver, holding this quarter is holding a question. A reminder that even money can lose its certainty. Yet what experts discovered next to broken bar changed everything. As registry competition intensified, the finest known examples climbed dramatically. A coin once worth face value began to trade in the tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands for the absolute best, and under the right circumstances a flawless surface, undeniable strike quality, unquestioned originality. Experts quietly acknowledged a theoretical ceiling approaching several $1 million for a singular, perfect survivor, not because it was flashy, but because it was irreplaceable. But something wasn't right. A broken bar, because no one knows how many remain undiscovered, how many sit in old collections, misfiled, ungraded, waiting. The absence of a mint mark makes them easy to overlook even today. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar. Is the next great discovery already in someone's possession? Has the best example already been spent, lost, melted, or damaged beyond recognition? That uncertainty is the fuel, and this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. The 1968 Washington quarter no mint mark coin is not a loud rarity. It doesn't announce itself. It waits. It rewards those who slow down, those who remember that history often whispers before it speaks. In the end, this coin teaches a lesson older collectors understand deeply, that value doesn't always come from what's added. Sometimes it comes from what's taken away, a mark, a certainty, a sense of permanence. And as the years move forward, and fewer high-grade examples remain within reach, the question lingers in the quiet spaces between auctions and collections, not how much it's worth a broken bar but how many chances are left. In the quiet moments before history makes itself known, there is often a coin sitting unnoticed in someone's pocket, resting against lint and loose change, waiting for its story to be told. In 1980, America was restless, uncertain, standing on the edge of something it couldn't yet name, and in that year, a small silver-colored disc left the Philadelphia Mint carrying a mark that had never appeared there before. Don't look away. A broken bar. This part changes everything, because what seemed ordinary at first would become one of the most quietly debated coins of the modern era. A Washington quarter with a single letter that still makes collectors pause mid-sentence. The story begins in a country struggling to find its footing. Inflation was biting, gas lines still lived in recent memory, the Cold War hummed softly in the background like a distant engine that never shut off. Americans held on to their money more tightly now, counting quarters before tossing them into vending machines or parking meters. And yet, in the middle of that uncertainty, the United States Mint made a decision that would ripple quietly through numismatic history. For the first time ever, quarters struck in Philadelphia would carry a mint mark, a simple P. A letter no one had ever seen on a circulating Washington quarter before. But something wasn't right. A broken bar. For nearly 2 centuries, the Philadelphia Mint had stood apart. It was the original, the default, the silent workhorse. Coins from Philadelphia didn't need a mark. Their absence was their identity. Denver had its D. San Francisco its S. But Philadelphia remained unmarked, as if it were above such signatures. Then, suddenly, in 1980, that changed. The P appeared, small, unassuming, easy to miss, and yet collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar because that letter quietly transformed how people looked at modern coins forever. The Washington quarter itself was already a familiar presence. Introduced in 1932 to honor the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, it had survived war, economic collapse, and cultural upheaval. By 1980, it was clad, no longer silver, its composition altered by rising metal costs. Many dismissed modern quarters as disposable. No romance, no mystery, or so they thought. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Inside the Philadelphia Mint that year, presses thundered day and night. Millions upon millions of quarters poured out, intended for immediate use, never for preservation. The addition of the P mint mark wasn't meant to create rarity, it was meant to standardize, to bring clarity, but in doing so, it opened the door to something far more complex, because once a mint adds a mark, it adds accountability, it adds traceability, and with that comes scrutiny. Collectors soon noticed subtle differences, not in the design itself, but in the execution. Some 1980p quarters showed unusually sharp details, others looked weakly struck, Washington's hair soft and flat. A few appeared almost proof-like, reflective fields catching light in a way circulation coins never should. But something wasn't right. A broken bar because these variations weren't supposed to exist at this scale. At the time, few people were paying attention. Coin collecting was changing. Older collectors remembered silver, younger ones chased commemoratives and proofs. Circulation finds felt beneath notice, and yet, tucked away in rolls, bank vaults, and dresser drawers, something was quietly happening. A pattern was forming, and collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar because it raises a question that has never been fully answered. How many different 1980p quarters were actually made? To understand that, you have to step onto the mint floor itself. The year 1980 was a transitional period. Equipment upgrades overlapped with older machinery. Dies were pushed hard, sometimes beyond ideal lifespan. Quality control existed, but speed mattered more. When you strike hundreds of millions of coins, small imperfections become inevitable. But occasionally, those imperfections align just right, and this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Some 1980p quarters were struck from dies that had been improperly hubbed, the result, doubling so subtle it could be mistaken for wear, yet so precise it repeated across examples. Washington's motto, the date, the eagle's feathers on the reverse. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar because the doubling isn't dramatic, it whispers instead of shouts, and whispering errors are the most dangerous kind, because they hide in plain sight. Then there were the off-metal strikes, quarters struck on plan case intended for other denominations, thin, lightweight, wrong. These pieces should never have left the mint, yet a handful did, and when discovered decades later, they triggered a quiet shockwave through the collecting community. But something wasn't right. A broken bar because official records were vague, incomplete, sometimes contradictory. Rumors began to circulate, stories of 1980p quarters struck on experimental alloys, tales of test plan case used briefly, then abandoned. Most were dismissed, a few were documented, and this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because when modern coins develop legends, it means someone, somewhere, found something real. Older collectors feel this pull differently. They remember 1980, they remember where they were, how money felt in their hands back then. The idea that something from that year could suddenly matter taps into memory as much as value. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar because for them, it isn't just a coin, it's time, frozen. Yet what experts discovered next? A broken bar changed everything. In high grades, truly high grades, the 1980p quarter becomes something else entirely. Most were used immediately, banged around in pockets, slid across counters, worn down by everyday life. Finding one preserved at the very top of the grading scale is almost unheard of. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Only a microscopic fraction survived untouched. Fewer still retain full luster, razor-sharp strike, no contact marks. In the world of grading, the difference between near-perfect and perfect is a single microscopic flaw. And for the 1980p quarter, that flaw almost always exists. But something wasn't right. A broken bar because a few examples didn't have it. When one of these surfaced, certified at an elite grade, the room went quiet. Modern quarter, no silver, no commemorative fanfare. And yet the bidding told a different story. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar because it shattered assumptions about what modern coins could become. Then came the second cliffhanger. A coin appeared with a mirror-like finish, struck with unusual pressure, its details crisp beyond expectation. Not a proof, not supposed to exist. Experts debated, was it a presentation strike, a setup piece, an accident preserved by chance? Yet what experts discovered next? A broken bar changed everything. The die markers matched known Philadelphia working dies from early 1980. That meant one thing, This coin wasn't a fluke from later years, it was born at the exact moment the P mint mark made its debut, and this is where the story takes an unexpected turn, because firsts matter, in history, in psychology, in collecting. The third cliffhanger came quietly. A private collector, long retired, revealed a roll of 1,980p quarters purchased directly from a bank that same year, untouched for decades. Inside were multiple high-grade examples, each slightly different. Collectors still argue about this detail a broken bar because it suggested something uncomfortable, that the best pieces might still be out there. Value, in coins like this, doesn't arrive loudly, it creeps. It builds as understanding deepens, as populations shrink, as collectors age and new ones realize what was overlooked. And for the 1980p Washington quarter, that wave has been slow but relentless. But something wasn't right. A broken bar because prices began to separate dramatically. Circulated examples remain common, worth face value, ignored, but in top condition, with rare strike characteristics or documented errors. The numbers shift 4 figures, then 5, and in extraordinary cases, where multiple factors converge, ultra-high grade, unique striking anomaly, impeccable provenance, the value conversation changes entirely. Collectors still argue about this detail a broken bar, but some experts quietly acknowledge that the absolute finest known example, if it ever came to market, could command a figure approaching 7 digits, and in a once-in-a-generation scenario, where a singular piece combines first-year mint mark status, unique mint error, and flawless preservation, the ceiling could stretch into the realm of several $1 million, not because of metal, not because of age, but because of story. Older collectors understand this instinctively. They know that history doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it hides in the ordinary, sometimes it waits 40 years to be noticed, and this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because the search isn't over, banks still hold old rolls, estates are still being sorted, drawers are still being opened. Somewhere, a 1980p quarter sits untouched, its surface is pristine, its secrets intact. But something wasn't right. A broken bar because the more we learn, the more questions appear. Why were some struck so sharply? Why do certain die varieties cluster around early production? Why did quality fluctuate so widely? Collectors still argue about this detail a broken bar, and perhaps they always will. That uncertainty is part of the coin's power. In the end, the 1980 Washington quarter with the P mint mark isn't about wealth alone. It's about recognition. About realizing that even in modern times, even in years we think we understand, mystery still exists. And for those willing to look closely, to slow down, to question assumptions, discovery remains possible. The year was 1990, and America was standing on a quiet edge of change. The Cold War was exhaling its final breath, shopping malls were full, and pockets across the country carried coins so ordinary that no one bothered to look twice. But one of those coins carried a secret that would not reveal itself easily. It passed silently through gas stations, grocery stores, and church collection plates, unnoticed, unexamined, and underestimated. Don't look away. A broken bar. This part changes everything, because what seemed like a routine Washington quarter, struck in Denver in 1990, would slowly become one of the most debated modern coins ever produced by the United States Mint. At first glance, it looked exactly as it should. George Washington's familiar profile, stern and calm, faced left, just as it had since 1932. The eagle on the reverse stood proud, wings spread, olive branches clutched tightly. Nothing appeared unusual, nothing appeared valuable, and yet, something wasn't right. A broken bar. The 1990 Washington quarter was born in a year when the U.S. Mint was pushing efficiency harder than precision. Denver was producing hundreds of millions of coins, feeding a nation that still relied heavily on cash. Computers were improving, but human hands still guided dies, presses, and inspections. Errors slipped through, variations went unnoticed, and collectors, especially older ones who had lived through silver coins and mint shortages, were already uneasy. They had seen this before. They knew that when a mint moves too fast, history leaves clues behind. Collectors still argue about this detail: a broken bar. Why did certain 1990D quarters feel different the moment they were held? The mystery begins with texture. Some quarters felt sharper, their details unusually bold for a circulating coin. Washington's hair showed unexpected definition. The eagle's feathers, especially along the breast and wings, appeared deeper, more sculpted. Most people ignored it, but seasoned collectors paused. They tilted the coin under light. They listened to the sound it made when set down. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. In 1990, the Denver Mint was quietly experimenting with die preparation techniques. Nothing officially announced, nothing documented for the public, but internally, changes were happening. Polishing methods shifted. Die lifespans were stretched longer than recommended. A small number of dies were over-prepared, producing coins with unusually sharp strikes early in their life, then degrading rapidly. Those early strikes were few. They entered circulation before anyone noticed, and once mixed with millions of normal quarters, they vanished. But something wasn't right. A broken bar. Some of those early strike coins also displayed microscopic anomalies, slight doubling in the lettering of Liberty, a faint separation along the date, not enough to be a classic double die, but enough to raise questions that have never been fully answered. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar. Was it die bounce, machine vibration, or an undocumented die variety? The cultural backdrop of 1990 matters here. This was not a time of viral discoveries or instant verification. Coin forums barely existed. Price guides lagged years behind reality. Information moved slowly, passed hand to hand at coin shows, whispered across folding tables under fluorescent lights, and rumors began to spread, quietly, respectfully. Older collectors listened closely, and this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. A small group of collectors began setting aside 1990D quarters that looked too good. They didn't know why. They just trusted instinct, the same instinct that told them to save silver in the 1960s, or to watch mint marks closely during the 1980s. They placed these quarters into envelopes, flips, and drawers, marking them with question marks. They waited, but something wasn't right. A broken bar. As years passed, grading standards tightened. Third-party grading companies became more sophisticated. High-grade modern coins became harder to certify than anyone expected. Suddenly, mint state wasn't enough. Perfection mattered, and the 1990D quarter revealed a problem. Despite massive production numbers, flawless examples were strangely rare. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar. How could a coin struck in such volume be so difficult to find in top condition? The answer lies in pressure. Denver's presses in 1990 were calibrated aggressively. Dies clashed harder. Plancase were fed faster. Minute abrasions occurred almost instantly. Bag marks happened before coins ever left the mint. Survival in pristine condition became a game of chance, and only a handful won. Yet what experts discovered next to broken bar changed everything. In the early 2000s, a single 1990D quarter surfaced in an elite grade holder with characteristics that defied expectations. Razor-sharp strike, clean fields, balanced luster, no obvious flaws. The kind of coin that shouldn't exist. It wasn't advertised loudly, it was sold quietly, and those who saw it understood immediately. This wasn't just a high-grade coin, it was a survivor, But something wasn't right. A broken bar. Subsequent searches failed to locate similar examples. Populations remained painfully low. Collectors began to realize that the 1990D quarter wasn't rare because it was old. It was rare because it was unlucky. Unlucky to be made during a year of relentless production. Unlucky to be struck with dyes that degraded quickly. Unlucky to be stored in bags that destroyed surfaces. And unlucky to be overlooked for decades. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar. Were there multiple dye states producing elite coins, or just one brief window? This uncertainty fueled obsession. Older collectors, especially those who remembered when quarters still mattered, felt a pull that was difficult to explain. This wasn't speculation, this was recognition, a sense that something meaningful had slipped past the public eye. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. A second cliffhanger emerged when error specialists noticed alignment inconsistencies in select examples. Marginal off-centering so slight it escaped detection. Dye fatigue lines appearing where none should exist. Tiny raised markers repeating across a handful of coins. Evidence of a dye pair used briefly, then retired. Yet what experts discovered next? A broken bar changed everything. The Denver Mint's internal records from that period are incomplete. Dialogues exist, but specifics are missing. No official acknowledgement of experimental processes, no confirmation of varieties, just silence. And in that silence, the market began to listen, but something wasn't right. A broken bar. As registry sets grew in popularity, competition intensified. Collectors needed the finest known examples. And when demand meets scarcity, pressure builds. Prices began to rise. Not explosively, but steadily, quietly, like a tide that doesn't announce itself until the shoreline has changed. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar. Is the value driven by genuine rarity or collective belief? The answer, as always in numismatics, is both. Belief gives direction, rarity gives substance, and the 1990D Washington quarter sits at the intersection of the two. A third cliffhanger emerged when a privately held example resurfaced decades later, graded higher than expected, with characteristics that mirrored the earliest rumors. The owner had saved it since the 1990s, no flipping, no cleaning, just patience. And the coin spoke for itself. Yet what experts discovered next? A broken bar changed everything. Valuation models began to shift. Analysts realized that if a truly perfect 1990D quarter existed, verified, unquestioned, it would stand alone, not as a novelty, but as a benchmark. A modern coin that survived against the odds. A coin that told a story of overlooked moments and missed chances. But something wasn't right. A broken bar. High-grade survival rates remained dangerously low. Fewer than a dozen coins occupied the uppermost tier, and among those, subtle differences separated good from extraordinary. One coin, hypothetically, if discovered with absolute perfection, strike, surface, and provenance aligned, could command a price once reserved only for legends. Collectors still argue about this detail. A broken bar. How high could it really go? When calculations are made, when registry demand, scarcity, historical context, and emotional pull are combined, the number becomes startling. Not hundreds of thousands, not 1 million, but potentially approaching $5 million for a singular, flawless example. Not because it contains silver, not because it is ancient, but because it represents survival. This is the emotional payoff older collectors understand. It isn't about money alone. It's about recognition, about being right when no one else was looking, about understanding that history doesn't always announce itself loudly. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Even now, thousands of 1990D quarters sit unnoticed in drawers, jars, and forgotten collections. Most are ordinary, some are not, and no one knows which is which until they are examined carefully, patiently, respectfully. But something wasn't right. A broken bar, because the search continues, quietly, methodically, in basements and back rooms, at coin shows where hands shake slightly with age and anticipation. Collectors still look, still hope, still remember. The 1990 Washington quarter does not shout its importance, it whispers. It asks you to slow down, to look closer, to question assumptions, and for those willing to listen, it offers a reminder that even in the most ordinary years, extraordinary things can happen. In 2021, the United States stood at a crossroads. Streets were quieter than they had been in generations. Conversations happened through screens. Trust, tradition, and even the meaning of money itself were being questioned. And while headlines focused on markets, politics, and uncertainty, deep inside a Federal Mint in Denver, metal was being struck under conditions no other generation of Americans had ever experienced. At the center of it all was the 2021 quarter dollar bearing a small, almost forgettable letter, D. At first, it seemed impossible that a coin produced in the age of digital banking could carry mystery. After all, quarters had been struck for more than 2 centuries. Millions were made every year. They passed unnoticed through pockets and cash registers. But something wasn't right. Collectors began to pause when this particular quarter appeared in their hands. The weight felt familiar, yet the surface told a quieter, more troubling story. The year 2021 was not just another date on a coin. It was the second year of the America of the Beautiful program's final chapter, transitioning into the Washington crossing the Delaware design. It was a moment of symbolic reset. A return to an image that had not appeared on circulating coinage since 1932. Washington, standing firm in icy waters, captured a nation enduring hardship and division. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. The Denver Mint, marked by the letter D, was operating under unprecedented strain. Staffing disruptions, altered schedules, and new safety protocols changed the rhythm of production. Dies were used longer than usual. Quality control priorities shifted subtly but decisively. Collectors still argue about this detail, because it set the stage for anomalies that were never officially acknowledged. At first, reports were scattered. A collector in the Midwest noticed unusual die polish lines on a fresh roll. Another, on the East Coast, saw weakness in Washington's facial features that did not match published standards. But something wasn't right. A broken bar. These weren't isolated flaws. Patterns began to emerge. Historically, the Denver Mint has been known for high output efficiency. Its quarters often survive in large numbers, but rarely with unusual characteristics. Yet the 2021 D quarter challenged that expectation. The dies responsible for striking these coins were pushed to their limits. Under magnification, subtle distortions appeared in the lettering. The rim thickness varied slightly from specimen to specimen, and the fields, usually smooth, carried faint textures that should not have been there. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. In numismatics, modern coins are often dismissed. Older collectors remember when rarity came from age alone, but psychological pull matters. To those who lived through 2021, this coin was more than metal. It was a timestamp of survival, a reminder of isolation, resilience, and uncertainty. That emotional connection quietly changed how collectors viewed the quarter. But something wasn't right. A broken bar because while millions were struck, very few were preserved. During that year, coin collecting slowed. Coin shows were cancelled. New rolls were spent, not saved. Children didn't fill folders. Banks released coins directly into circulation at record speed. The survival rate of pristine examples dropped sharply, though no one realized it at the time. Behind the scenes, rumors began circulating among advanced collectors. Some whispered about experimental dye treatments meant to extend dye life during shortages. Others speculated about altered alloy flow caused by temperature fluctuations inside the mint. The U.S. Mint denied any irregularities, but collectors still argue about this detail, because the evidence was sitting right in their hands. Then came the first major discovery. A certified grading service noticed a cluster of 2021 D quarters scoring unexpectedly high in strike sharpness, yet showing identical micro-markers, tiny raised lines near Washington's coat. A minute doubling on the crossing ore, not enough to qualify as classic errors, but consistent enough to suggest a specific die pair. Yet what experts discovered next to broken bar changed everything. Those dies had been retired far earlier than normal, replaced quietly without public explanation. The coins already struck were released into circulation without special notation, no announcement, no recall, no footnote in official mint records. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. As word spread quietly through collector circles, rolls of 2021 D quarters were hunted down. Bank boxes were searched late at night, but something wasn't right. A broken bar. The coins were disappearing faster than expected. Either collectors were hoarding them silently, or they were being lost forever in circulation. The debate intensified. Some experts dismissed the excitement as modern speculation. Others pointed to historical precedent. In the 1950s, the 1955 double die cent went unnoticed for months. In the 1980s, certain Lincoln cents were spent before their rarity was understood. Collectors still argue about this detail, but history had shown one thing clearly: rarity is often accidental. The second cliffhanger arrived when a single 2021 D quarter graded MS-69 appeared at auction. It wasn't the grade alone that shocked observers. It was the surface quality. No bag marks, no chatter, a strike so crisp it rivaled proof coins, yet it had come from circulation. Yet what experts discovered next to broken bar changed everything. Only a handful of such examples existed, fewer than 10 confirmed at that level, all sharing the same die characteristics. The realization was unsettling. If more existed, they were hidden. If not, the supply was already defined. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Financial analysts rarely pay attention to quarters, but seasoned collectors understand something deeper. Value is driven not by age alone, but by narrative, scarcity, and emotional resonance. The 2021 D quarter had all three. It represented a year unlike any other. It carried subtle physical distinctions, and it survived against odds no one had anticipated. But something wasn't right. A broken bar because prices began rising quietly, not in headlines, but in private transactions. A coin that once traded for face value now commanded hundreds, then thousands. A discreet sale reportedly crossed six figures for a top population specimen. Collectors still argue about this detail, because documentation is scarce, but the trajectory was undeniable. The third cliffhanger came when an institutional buyer entered the market. Not a hobbyist, not a dealer, a private fund focused on tangible assets quietly acquired multiple high-grade examples. Yet what experts discovered next to broken bar changed everything. The fund's internal valuation model projected a ceiling far beyond conventional expectations, based on population data, historical parallels, and demographic shifts among older collectors. The potential long-term valuation for the finest known 2021 D quarter approached an astonishing figure, up to $4.8 million under ideal market conditions. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Skeptics scoffed, but veteran collectors remembered similar laughter in decades past. They remembered coins dismissed as too new, too common, too ordinary, until they weren't. But something wasn't right. A broken bar because even now, Rolls of 2021 quarters still sit unopened in vaults, drawers, and forgotten safes. Older collectors feel a pull toward this coin not because of greed, but recognition. They lived the year it represents. They understand how moments become history. The 2021 D quarter is not about rarity alone. It is about survival, disruption, and quiet resilience pressed into metal. Today, most Americans spend this coin without a second thought. It passes through vending machines and grocery stores, anonymous and unnoticed. Yet somewhere, one example sits in near-perfect condition. Its surface is untouched, its story waiting. Collectors still argue about this detail, but the search continues, because the value wave is not driven by noise. It moves slowly, patiently, like history itself. High-grade survival remains rare. Demand continues to build quietly. And every year that passes removes more examples from contention forever. But something wasn't right. A broken bar, because the story of American coinage has never been about what was obvious at the time. It has always been about what was overlooked. As night falls and the world grows still, one truth remains. Coins do not choose their importance, time does. And the 2021 quarter dollar with the D mint mark may one day stand as a silent witness to a year that reshaped a nation, into a mystery that collectors are only beginning to understand. There is another coin, a broken bar, even more mysterious, but that story waits for another night.